2, 1.
You're about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to yet another edition of Liberty Talk Radio. Today it is our pleasure to introduce as our guest Karen Hudes. Karen studied at the University of Yale law and also economics at the University of Amsterdam. She worked at the Export-Import Bank, and also she was in the legal department for the World Bank. She became a whistleblower, basically, I guess is the term to use for it, and now is an advocate, and she remains vigilant in her efforts to correct the global monetary system, which she asserts is on the way to collapse. Karen, thank you so much for being on our program this morning.
Thanks for having me on, Joe.
I should say thank you for returning. It's been a while, but thank you so much for returning to the program. Karen, I would imagine that if anyone who was somewhat awake would agree that there's something maybe askew with the financial system worldwide, not only here in the United States, but worldwide. They don't know what it is. They know it's not right. They know there's many people out there making high-level decisions, and not many people have a good feeling about that. They sort of know that there's, they don't want to believe it, but they know it intrinsically that there's something that's going to happen, and it ain't going to be pretty. Are people's speculation or feeling, are they incorrect, or are they really on the right track?
They're both. They're dead right that things are wrong, but they're incorrect in thinking that it's going to be a very bad landing. That's because we've actually been working together in a Dream Team coalition, and it turns out that coalition, the groundwork for that has been laid by people who saw what was wrong with the system and managed to put the necessary tools in place so that we could clean things up in a very smooth way. And we've inherited from their efforts, and I'm happy to explain who these people were and what we've inherited and how a team is working to just have a beautifully smooth transition.
Well, when you say that, you're saying that even if there is an economic anomaly somehow, they can account for that, and they can adjust the system for it, and so we will not have an economic collapse? That will not happen?
Yes, because all of the world's wealth is in a trust fund, and I'm working as the lawyer on that trust fund. So we, the people of the world, own the wealth, and we're going to take it back. I filed as a lawyer. There are things you can do when you own wealth, and that trust fund, which has the gold monetary reserves of all of the countries of the world, including the United States. There's no gold in Fort Worth. The Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve do not have the gold reserves. And when they say there's 8,000 metric tons of gold backing the Federal Reserve note, they're lying. And so I did something called a notarial protest. And I filed that with the Postmaster General of the United States. And I filed that with the Universal Postal Union, which was set up by Benjamin Franklin, because Benjamin Franklin knew at some point in the future, the citizens of the United States would be called on to confront the bankers that are trying to hold us in thrall, in slavery. So I filed this notarial protest, and then after that, I had the right to file financing statements saying that the Federal Reserve was insolvent and owed this trust the money that they've actually, they issued bonds back in the 1930s that were about $310 trillion worth. and those bonds carried interest, which has been compounding. So the banks owe us more than we owe them. The banks are insolvent, and we have put them into receivership. And so I filed the financing statements in each of the states where the Federal Reserve banks are. There's 12 Federal Reserve banks, and I filed them in 11 states because Missouri has both the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City and also the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis.
Okay.
And the secretaries of state who maintained those records didn't just sit on what I filed. They challenged me, which was a stupid move, because I could then back up those financing statements and make them even stronger. So what I did was I wrote a letter back to the Secretary of State of Illinois, and I cleared that letter with 188 ministers of finance who are on the board of governors of the World Bank and the IMF, because that trust fund, when it was set up in secret for 50 years, because there's a concept called statute of limitations. If you say that you own something and you don't gain control over it for 50 years, you've lost your claim. And so they wanted to make sure that when that gold came out of its period of secrecy, that's called sequestration, they wanted to make sure that there weren't going to be legal arguments and that it was going to be tangled up in the courts. And they also said that these assets are not subject to any court jurisdiction.
Right.
So they can now come out, and the ministers of finance at the World Bank and IMF can decide what to do with the world's gold monetary reserves. And they've already decided, and we just have to implement it. And it's going to be very clean.
Where is this gold? Physically, where is it?
A lot of it is buried in the Philippines. And do you remember that Typhoon Haiyan? That was an excuse for the U.S. military, who were saying that they were trying to help the Philippines. No, they went and they guarded that area where a lot of those reserves are buried. But it's also in 600,000 metric tons are in the Central Bank of the Philippines. And there are also scattered smaller deposits. But the bulk of it is in the Philippines. And by the way, some people were telling me that there were secret military transports of some of that gold, and that the gold is very heavy, and some of the helicopters were falling down. And so what I did was I filed claims, and that gold is insured. And one of the insurance companies is Liberty Mutual. I spoke yesterday to a representative of Liberty Mutual, and I told them that we did not want to file any claims. What we wanted to do was to find who took that gold and bring it right back, because it belongs to the people of the world in this trust fund. And I also spoke to Liberty Mutual about some other claims, because the federal judiciary, the judges, when they sit in courts, those are not the courts that our Constitution entitles the citizenry to. Those are special courts. They're administrative courts. They're special kangaroo courts.
Okay.
And the judges have to take an oath, and there's a fidelity oath, and those fidelity oaths, there's about 400 companies that issue them. I spoke to all of the members there of the federal, the Fidelity and Surety Association. They were meeting. They're also meeting today. And I told them, I said, I don't want to have to file claims, because all of these federal judges are sitting there and lying to the people that go to them in their courts. What happens, and I found this out, we were just speaking about this a little bit before I went on air. The reason I know these things is because I've been working this problem of world corruption in the financial system for a long time, and people come to me. We've got a coalition of whistleblowers, and so somebody told me about a book that a fellow named George Mercier wrote. George Mercier was the clerk of the federal courts in New York. And in 1985, he wrote a book which he put on the internet called Invisible Contracts. When you sign your bank signature card, underneath that signature in fine print says subject to bank rules. And if you go into the bank rules, it says, I waive my right to go to a real federal court. And then that's the basis on which those judges are hoodwinking everybody. And I actually went to the federal court in the District of Columbia, And because I had a case, I bought a World Bank bond, and that meant that the World Bank was not immune from suit, because I knew that the World Bank financial statements were not accurate. I knew that because KPMG, who the board asked to do a special kind of audit called an audit of internal controls. That means if you have an audit of internal controls, it means that the information that's given to the board is accurate, because people are not going to be retaliated against when they correct inaccurate statements. And the people that work inside the World Bank are not allowed to go to the courts, and any of them that try to correct inaccurate information to the board get fired. There's a goon squad called the Institutional Integrity Department that makes sure that the people that work at the World Bank know that they have to keep their mouths shut. Well, I that group, the Institutional Integrity Department. When I was in the World Bank, I knew my job as the lawyer was to make sure that there were internal controls.
Right.
And when, I documented this and went up the corporate ladder inside the World Bank, and then I followed the rules of professional responsibility for lawyers. And when you can't manage to clean things up internally, you're supposed to go externally. So then I went to the Treasury Department for about 3 years, exhausted all the administrative procedures there, and then I went to the Congress. And that's why I'm able to do all of these things. We were talking a little bit about how improbable it is that one obstreperous lady could manage to get this far. But what I've been doing is I've just been playing by the book. And so if anybody didn't like what I was doing, there was very little they could do, because I was uncovering a cover-up. And if something happened to me, that was just going to blow the cover-up sky high.
So you're playing within the system, not outside the system, in order to expose the system. Am I correct?
That was always my battle plan.
Yeah.
Because,
okay. And that's why you're probably still walking the face of the earth today.
Well, also because I started out in ignorance. I didn't realize how corrupt things were.
Yeah.
I knew that there were issues, but I figured that they were smaller issues. It's kind of like
right.
I felt as I was going through this whole corruption, each time I felt like I was in an elevator, and I would get off at this floor and I would work whatever the corruption was at that floor, and I would figure I had solved the problem, and no, it wasn't solved. But I'm actually employed by the World Bank, because at the end of my lawsuit against KPMG, my lawsuit was settled by the ministers of finance on the Board of Governors. And I couldn't get back inside the World Bank because the security firm at the World Bank is owned by what we call the Network of Global Corporate Control. That is a group that thinks they're entitled to run the world secretly with these
right.
crazy contracts. And it's the legal profession that has facilitated that group. Not all the lawyers, because most of them are ignorant. They don't teach about this corruption in the law schools, obviously. But the ones at the very apex of the profession do know how the system is gamed. And what I did just this week was I went to the spring meeting of the International Law Section of the American Bar Association. And because things have progressed so far, I was able to say very convincingly that this was the legal profession's last chance. And if they didn't start helping us, we were going to get rid of this corruption, and we were going to know that there was no such thing as a legal profession. Yeah. So I'm now working with the International Law Section of the ABA in cleaning up this corruption.
Well, it's interesting because most of what you said I have never heard before. Many of these organizations I have never heard about before, and yet these are the organizations that apparently are controlling our monetary system. And yet this is all undercover. This is all, everything that we see as Americans reading in newspapers or even reading books or whatever, we're not privy to any of this. So we can never make a decision as to where we stand unless we know what you are saying or understand what you are saying. Of course, this is not taught in our school system. Obviously, our bankers are not going to tell us this. And I just find it so confounding that we seem to be living in some sort of parallel universe, and the two will never meet. we're in one, they're in the other, and they're in control, and we think we are controlled, but we're not. Am I sort of just generally speaking on the right track, or did I misunderstand everything you just said?
You didn't misunderstand, but there are clear areas where we're not in parallel systems, where things really are one. And one of those, I don't know what you want to call them, links. One of these links came to the World Bank in 2004. A political scientist named Jacek Kugler, who had developed a power transition Department of Defense, came to the World Bank with this model, which is extremely accurate. It's 90 to 95% accurate. What is it? You ask an expert what to try to come up with numbers on various inputs for the model. One of the inputs is who are the stakeholders? Who are the groups that influence the problem? The other input that you have to estimate is how powerful these stakeholders are. You have to guess where the stakeholders are on a problem, and you also have to guess how important that issue is to that particular stakeholder. That's a value that Jacek Kugler called salience. So, for example, if the President of the United States is one of the groups or entities that influence a problem, you have to guess on his pile of things to deal with, where is this? Is this an important issue or not?
Right.
So, for example, I modeled rule of law at the World Bank, and I didn't realize I was modeling rule of law in the whole world. But that's what I was doing, because the World Bank is like a microcosm of the world. The countries, it's not like one country, one vote.
Right.
There are 188 members, and the votes are weighted in relationship to how powerful the economies are for those countries.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And so I modeled that, and then Jacek Kugler had done the same model, but for the world at large. And these models coincided. And what it showed was that it was possible for coalitions to form to win the problem of rule of law. And so as the lawyer at the World Bank, I knew that my job was to work with those coalitions on the board of the World Bank. The World Bank has two different layers of governance. There's an internal board, which is representatives of the countries. There's 25 of them, and the 8 largest economies each get their own dedicated executive director, and the rest of the countries are grouped in what they call constituencies. So I was working with those executive directors, and I have never stopped working with them. I nag them, I send them emails. At one point, they stopped letting my emails go through, so I started faxing. And then I would call people up because they knew me, and they would say, "Oh, well, the fax machine didn't work; it didn't print out." So I would say, "Okay, well, give me your personal email address, and I'll." And so that's how I've been in touch with all of these people.
Yeah. Well, let me just stop for a second. I want to remind our listeners that you could call in and ask any question of Ms. Hudes. Our toll-free number is 888-773-4496. It's 888-773-4496. Please feel free to ask a question. You will not be interrupting us. This program is for you. If you do call in and if you're listening on the phone but you want to ask a question, just dial 1. Just press the 1 button and it'll signal that you want to ask a question. So it's 888-773-4496, and then just press the number 1 button, and we'll know that you want to ask a question. So I know we have people on the line. However, we will not know if you want to ask a question unless you press the 1 button, and that's one thing that's missing sometimes. Okay, now why is all this gold from Fort Knox or from wherever wherever it's supposed to be in the United States? Why is it in the Philippines?
Good question. Because there is a man named Jose Rizal, who used to be something called the Black Pope. The Black Pope is the head of the Jesuits, the superior general of the Jesuits. And he was from the Philippines. He's actually the nephew of Queen Victoria, I believe, of Queen Elizabeth. His father was a twin brother of Queen Victoria. And he was a very active fellow. He's actually the father of Hitler, had an illegitimate child with a German woman. And so he's the father of Hitler.
Oh my
goodness. He's also,
this sounds so fantasy and stuff. It really does. You can't make this stuff up, Karen. You know that. You cannot make this stuff up.
He's the father of General Yamashita, who went around gathering the gold between the world wars. Yes?
Okay.
Yes. Okay,
Okay, yeah.
So the Vatican trusted him with the Vatican's gold. What is this gold? This is gold from the Spanish conquistadors. This is gold from the Aztec gold. This is gold from King Solomon. This is and human civilization stretches back much longer than we know.
Right, I understand that.
Because there were maps that show that somebody was able to make maps before this ice age. They can show the coastline of Australia. Okay. So there's a lot more gold than people understand there is, and they sent it to the Philippines. The Vatican sent it to the Philippines because they were concerned whether this gold would be captured during the world wars. And what happened was Jose Rizal took the gold, shipped it to Singapore, melted it down, stamped it, and put it in a trust fund for the benefit of humanity. He didn't like what he saw at the Vatican, and then he established the World Bank and the IMF so that after the 50-year period, these institutions would be able to decide what to do with the world's gold.
Well, if the Vatican wanted to reclaim its gold, could it do so, or they'd say, "Sorry, it's not marked the Vatican; it's marked something else. It's marked the world's gold."
They have done every conceivable trick to try to get that gold back, and it hasn't worked. It has not worked, but they've been making use of the float, and that's a lot of float. But in the meantime,
okay, they're using the gold in the Philippines as collateral, so to speak.
No, more than that. If you have assets, you can earn money on those assets. So they have been trying to earn money on the assets, but they've had a real problem because some of that gold they issued bonds to gather up. Okay, and those bonds have been compounding the interest on those bonds.
Accruing interest, right? For the
That's right. So there's something called the Network of Global Corporate Control. This is the bankers primarily. All of the companies on the capital markets are actually under the control of this, what they call these three mathematicians at the Federal Institute of Technology call the super entity. So this super entity actually owes us more money than we owe them because of all the interest that has been compounding on these bonds. That's worth $2 quadrillion. So we can cancel out all of the country debt.
Let me repeat what you just said. $2 quadrillion. That's 1,000 trillion dollars.
Yes, and these numbers are astronomical. And let me tell you what I did.
That's from here to Pluto somewhere.
That's right. And let me tell you what I did. I filed financing statements against the 12 Federal Reserve banks because they owe us this money. They're insolvent. They're bankrupt. We have a right to get rid of them and clean up our terrible corruption in the international financial system. And that's exactly what we're doing. What's going on with this power transition model? When I got my statement on the UK Parliament website, and I got actually 3 statements up, and the third statement was together with a UK whistleblower named Elaine Colville. Once that happened, this power transition model predicted that we were going to have coalitions that would take back the rule of law in the world. And we are completely on track for that. We are this close to...
How would that take effect? How do you envision this taking effect, taking back control? And when you say that, what do you really mean by that? I'm sorry, my mind is not fixed on it. I mean, you're so far ahead of me. I'm running like crazy, and I'm trying to catch up with you. And I'm sorry, I'm so ignorant. I'm just not smart like you. I hope my listeners are a lot smarter than I am.
It's because I've been living this. Okay, let me explain what my position is so people understand.
Yeah, Dick and Jane it for me, please. Dick and Jane it for me, because I
am simply. Have you ever seen the pictures of comedians at the switchboard, especially these old switchboards where you've got these? You have to put a plug in to connect.
Oh, the telephone switchboard. Yes, obviously, yeah.
Okay, that's my job. I'm sitting at the switchboard of the international financial system. The decision makers are each of the countries. We are not talking about a one world system. We're talking about each and every country getting back its own gold that was put in this trust fund and deciding themselves what they want to do. And it's not just what we're going to do is we're going to take the paper currencies, Federal Reserve notes. That's not the U.S. dollar.
That's correct.
I'll give you a difference.
That's right.
When you look at the quarters, those are issued by the U.S. government. You don't have to pay interest on that.
That's correct.
Yeah? Okay, but the paper dollars, we have to pay interest
That's
on
right.
debt.
To the Federal Reserve.
Yeah. There's no reason to pay interest to private bankers.
Right.
That's just a scam. They're
Right.
hoodwinking, and
I'm with you there.
all of the countries are having these problems. In Canada, they didn't have to issue currency from this network of global corporate control until 1973, and they actually have a lawsuit against the government that's forcing Canadian citizens to pay interest on their debt. And how do we pay interest on the debt? When you pay your income taxes.
Through taxation, right.
Ronald Reagan did a study, the Grace Commission, and the Grace Commission showed that 100% of our income taxes are leaving the country. They're going to these bankers, to this network of global corporate control. That means that each and every person is working an average of 3 months of the year to pay bankers for no good reason.
Right.
No good reason.
That's why I want to be a banker, Karen. I want to be a banker.
Because
I want to be one of those criminals. I mean, that sounds like such a great job. You don't do anything, you just collect money.
And what they do is when a president wants to do his real job and
Right.
represent the American citizens, like John F. Kennedy, they kill him.
Right.
John F. Kennedy had actually signed something called the Green-Hilton Agreement,
Right.
which was going to take these gold reserves in the trust that I'm telling you about and back up Treasury dollars. And 8 days after he signed the Green-Hilton Agreement, that's when they murdered him.
Was that executive order actually
Yes.
dissolving the Federal Reserve?
Well, Kennedy had done a number of things, but he signed something called the Green-Hilton Agreement, which is where he got the gold that belongs to the United States citizens. And by the way, it does belong to the citizens. In the 30s,
Absolutely.
Roosevelt collected it up.
Yeah, if you have a piece of paper that should, I know it does not today, represent a claim on that gold, it belongs to the citizens, and they broke that trust back in 1971 and actually back in 1933. But is this the reason why when Germany asked for its gold from us, we first of all we refused up front, but then we decide to give them like 300 tons or some small amount every year for the next 7 years or whatever? Is that all part of this? Is this why we're reluctant?
That's exactly right. That's exactly. But we didn't even meet our agreement with that.
That's right. Yeah, we gave them only a small amount.
And Germany is not the only country that's been asking for its gold back now.
Right.
Yeah. So let me just put one thought out there, which is a lot of people are worried. I'm telling people that there's going to be a smooth transition, but I have no guarantee. Right. And they're wondering what they should do. What you should do is you should buy gold. And there's an easy, good way to do that now. In Austria, they have issued a special kind of gold which breaks down into small increments of 8 grams each, worth 5 grams each, which is worth about $8.
Okay. That's a very small amount. Very, very small amount of gold.
Yes, so you can just go and buy that, and you will have currency if we don't have a
real,
smooth
true
transition.
currency. Okay.
And when you've got your money in the banks, that's not a good place for it to be right now.
Yeah.
You buy these Austrian gold bars, and you'll be sitting pretty for a smooth transition.
Yeah, Karen, if you'd like to could you hold on for about a minute and a half? We need to stop for break, okay? And we'll be back in about a minute and a half, okay? Please do not go away. Folks, this is Karen Hudes, of the former attorney, legal counsel for the World Bank. Fascinating conversation. We're going to stop just for a minute for station identification. Do not go away. And be prepared to ask your question. It's 888-773-4496 and press that 1 button. Okay, we'll be right back.
Derived from a historical perspective, not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure Libertarian Talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more. We'd like to thank attorney Constance Squires for her support of Liberty Talk Radio. If you want a comprehensive way to affordably avoid legal issues, call Constance Squires. For a free consultation, call 918-254-9283 or go online at isthyWillDone.com.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty Talk Radio.
Folks, we're back. This is Liberty Talk Radio. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and with us today we have Karen Hudes, former legal counsel with the World Bank, talking about the world monetary system and maybe what you should do to protect yourself from this malaise of money that's out there that we truly don't understand. And I'll be, I'm an investor, I'm a business owner, and I have to admit, I am absolutely ignorant of really what is going on, and she's enlightening us as to the vagaries of all of the transactions that are occurring behind the scenes, things that we don't see or hear about, but we should be aware of. Even if we do not understand it, it is enough to just be inquisitive and be reluctant to believe what you hear on mainstream television. Am I correct, Karen? Did I overstate myself, or I'm just trying to Dick and Jane it, if you will?
You're absolutely, completely correct.
Oh, wow.
The mainstream media is just owned and controlled by this network that wants people to think that they've got the right to rule everybody. And we fired them, actually. This coalition that I've been telling you about, we're actually in control. And people want to know, what is the coalition? It consists of the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These 5 countries no longer accept or using dollars when they finance their international trade. It's the group of 77, which is actually 133 developing countries. Now, people want to know, why is it that I'm involved in all of this? It's because when I was, I was the Vietnam War protest era. Right. And when they said, love it or leave it, I said, I was just so upset about what was going on with Vietnam that I went to Holland and I studied development economics there. But then I realized that a lot of what I was aggravated about was taking place back in the United States. So I went to Yale Law School. And then after that, between my second and third year at Yale, I studied something called the Group of 77, which is the developing countries at the UN that developed a coalition. You're now going to meet my cat. He's Mocha. We don't want him up here.
Live television.
That's okay. We recently had 3 cats. Unfortunately, 2 died recently. They had feline leukemia. And they were wonderful cats. We have 1 cat now and 3 dogs. So believe me, I understand. My cats are walking all over me. I love them.
You know, a lot of people are getting interested in what's going on. And Monk has done this before. And that's when you know, I had to introduce my Siamese cats. He's got a brother, Java. But anyway, so where was I? I was talking about the group of 77.
Yes.
So they're called 77 because it was in 1977 that they coalesced. But I studied in 1976. I went to the UN as an intern with UNCTAD, and I wrote a legislative history, 200 pages. And so when I was hired by the World Bank, it was Ibrahim Shihada, who was the General Counsel of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, who brought me into the World Bank. And, you know, I've been working with any number of executive directors of these countries that are part of this coalition all through my career, and keeping them informed. And if people are saying, well, how do we know you're really working with these countries? I've been on RTTV, I've been on Press TV.
Right.
Now, these countries, when they present me, don't present the full story because they've also got a role to play. But their people know very, very well that we in the United States are about to take back our country. And how are we going to do that? It's the county executives of America that have accepted the gold that belongs to the United States. And I was starting to tell you, I filed these financing statements, and the Secretary of State of Illinois challenged it, and he, you know, the challenge didn't hold. And then it was the Secretary of State of Missouri who challenged the financing statement that I filed for the Federal Reserve Bank of Missouri and of St. Louis, and also the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. And then I sent a copy to all of the secretaries of state of all of the states saying, these UCC financing statements are correct. We own the gold, not the Federal Reserve. They are insolvent. And I've been in touch with, there are 4 companies that own the Federal Reserve. That's BlackRock, State Street, Fidelity, and what's the 4th one? Anyway, I've been in touch with their lawyers. I've said, why are you hanging on and making it difficult for us?
Is that Fidelity? Fidelity, the big Fidelity investment firm?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Wow.
If you read the analysis of these 4 mathematicians, you see that this group, what they did was they didn't think we would find out about them. They put the same directors on interlocking boards. They have 10 times the economic might that they're entitled to because of the clever, secret way that they did this. But this fraud that they've committed will only work if it's secret. And it's not secret. We know what they're doing. So they really have to step down now. They're just being obstreperous. And let me explain to you how this works. The District of Columbia in 1871 was set up. They incorporated the United States secretly. And so the police force in the District of Columbia is paid for by this network of global corporate control, which is bankrupt. So we're actually now paying their salaries. They're in receivership.
Yeah.
So I went, I've been dealing with these police. I dealt with Commander Michael Reese. He was the head of the 2nd Precinct, which is where the World Bank is located. And I said, when people call to say that I'm supposed to be thrown out, you better not respond because you are just corrupt. I'm the one who's paying your salary now because the network of global corporate control is bankrupt. And so after I said that, he was relieved of his post. And I went to the Board of Ethics and Government Accountability, and there are 2 people who I explained this to. One was Robert Spagnoletti, and the other was Darren Sobin. So what those sneaks did was they put Melvin Gresham in. So during the spring meetings of the World Bank and IMF, he sent another group of police down when I'm the one paying those police salaries.
Yeah.
That was pretty,
Yeah.
So if you think right after this program, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Robert Spagnoletti and Darren Sobin, because they had the nerve to write in the publication for the District of Columbia lawyers. They were writing about how they were cleaning up the District of Columbia. Yeah, so we're going to see how they're cleaning up the District of Columbia, and I'm going to be taking that.
Let me ask you a question.
You can find out how clean Robert Spagnoletti and Darren Sobin is after this broadcast.
Whenever I get into a light duty compared to this conversation with other people about money and world affairs, I always tell them, I say, I live by the adage, follow the money. And I said, when people talk about what we should do in Iraq and Iran and all that, I go, please, it just gives me a headache. Just follow the money. When Saddam Hussein decided to disrespect, if you will, the U.S. dollar by no longer accepting the euro dollar for its oil, basically. What it did, all of a sudden, from our ally, he became our enemy. When John F. Kennedy decided, well, maybe we should do away with the Federal Reserve and have our own central bank, and we should own the gold, something happened to him. When Gaddafi decided to develop an AFRICOM, which was a gold-based currency for Africa, all of a sudden he disappeared. When Iran decided to sell its oil using its proprietary currency, bingo, they became, world a terrorist organization with nuclear capabilities, and we have to do something about it. I said, to me, it all has to do with the money and the gold. Anytime anyone is disrespectful to the petrodollar or to the gold standard as it should be, or the way it is, rather, not the way it should be, but the way it is, I said, some leader dies. I said, don't you see the pattern? Am I way off on that, or is that just my demented mind thinking illogically, or how far off am I on that?
You're right on target. Follow the money, follow the gold. It's not just gold, it's also silver.
Right.
It could be, and people also worry when we talk about how we're going to be transforming the financial system. They say, we don't want a gold standard. This is not a gold standard. This is actual gold that's going to be in the bills. There's a process where you put it very thin and you put it between a plastic envelope. And we also say that if any country wants to use a different commodity and issue a different currency, they're welcome to do that. And we're also saying that there should be local currencies issued in the local villages.
Right.
This would create full employment.
Right.
And the thing we were talking about, which is if presidents are managed to have terrible things happen to them, or Ronald Reagan when he was shot by Hinckley, and then they drove him around Washington for a few hours until he decided that he wouldn't issue dollars, because after the Grace Commission study, he didn't want to be paying interest on the U.S. currency either. Anyway, so people say, well, Karen, how are you protected? And the point is, if anything should happen to me, other people can pick up just where I've left off, because there is never a day that I've got some hidden agenda that I have to do the next day. I always clear my plate, and that means that there's no secrets here. The only thing, if something should happen to me, is that more people would know about this hidden secret corruption.
Well, so that's what keeps you so young, Karen.
Thank you. I'll come back on your program anytime, Joe.
You look terrific. Well, the man on the street, what advice do you have for the man on the street who would have very little knowledge of a baseline from which to understand what you're saying? All right, I understand generally what you're saying. I'm nowhere near where you are, but I would imagine I am light years ahead of the average person on the street, because I delve in this somewhat. What do you tell these people? What do you tell people that would not comprehend what you are saying at all, and you say, fine, I didn't understand what you said, but what do I do? I mean, what is the average person to do right now? And where do you think the stock market will go? And where do you think our currency will go in the future, in the near future?
The first thing I say to anybody is don't listen to the experts. You have to be your own expert. And certainly don't listen to the mainstream media or the majority of the alternative media, because you have to be skeptical. You have to do your own thinking. And if you say, well, I can't do it all, of course you can. That's what your friends are for. Get together in a group, because there are going to be a lot of changes going forward. These are all going to be good changes. But it's going to be up to you to make those changes stick and to make them work. And you have to have a network so that you can analyze these things.
But we're going to have to sacrifice. We're going to have to sacrifice a lot of what we're doing today in order to accommodate the changes that are coming. Is that not true?
That is absolutely false.
Oh, it is? Okay.
We have got all of the wealth in the world that's coming to us, but the most wealth that we have is our own labor. We're going to keep more of what we do, because it's not going to be skimmed off by these crooks. So we're going to have full employment. But we're going to have to work together and methodically, really, because there's a lot of changes are going to have to be made. But nobody's forcing us to make them right away.
Well, you're talking about the dismantling of the federal government, federal control, and localizing the control. Then,
well, let's put it this way: the very first thing that I think we ought to do, although it's not going to be up to me, because the World Bank has a rule, and that is that you're not supposed to intervene and tell people what to do in their own countries.
Right.
But our Constitution is not in effect. We have a second secret constitution that was put in place in 1871, and that needs to go. And we have a means to do that, because Benjamin Franklin understood that we were going to have to confront the bankers and get them back in their place.
Right.
And so what we need to do is there's a provision, Article 5 in the Constitution, which is the Congress is supposed to call for a convention, which then the convention doesn't do anything. It makes proposals, and then those proposals have to be ratified. So there's a lot of flack about we can't have a constitutional convention because it's going to be too risky. It's not risky. You then have to ratify whatever the convention proposes. What I would hope the convention would do is just one thing, and that is to propose that we put the Constitution that we think is in place, that we put that into place, because we have had the Congress since 1861 has been declaring a state of emergency. We're under martial law right now. That's why we have these terrible corrupt courts and these federal judges who are masquerading as judges, whereas in reality, they are simply employees of this corporation that was put into the District of Columbia. So what I would say to people on the street is, don't listen to the experts. They've been lying to you. Try to figure out what you need to know. Don't do it all at once. You'll drive yourself crazy. Figure out what's the most important thing that's going to make things possible to go forward. And you know, I studied economics in Holland, and I'm not going to tout myself as a major economist, but there are some principles of economics.
Yes, we seem to violate all of them, don't we?
Well, one principle is the multiplier effect. Every person that loses their job is actually cutting out 2.5 jobs because their purchasing power, and then you add that up for the purchasing power of the other. So we have to go very slowly so that we're not going to have a downward spiral. So we should disturb as little as possible. What we need to do, though, is we need to get our heads on straight and understand just how we've been duped. We have to admit how we've been duped, and it's not pretty, and it's not
I know.
fun.
I agree. You know, I can understand that because I've been an investor for many years, and after a while, you become very, very almost cynical as an investor, because you know the system is not working properly. You know there's something wrong with the system, and here we are, you know, with 0% interest rates, which is tantamount to insanity. There is not one economics books that would tell you that zero interest rates is good for any economy, and yet we have the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, telling us, what an efficient strategy that is for our economy. I mean, the whole thing is upside down, inside out. I would imagine. Where do you think the stock market is going in this type of environment that we have now? Are we about tapped out?
This all depends. This all depends on whether we're able to do a smooth transition, which this power transition model is saying is very, very likely.
Okay.
If we can do that, if people are listening and if people are keeping their heads on straight, and so, for example, what was going on in Baltimore, my guess is that a lot of that was provocateurs starting it off. We don't want that kind of a transition.
That's correct.
That's not going to serve anybody.
Right.
We want to do things very calmly and slowly and just take our time and figure out what makes sense to us. And nobody's gonna come in and tell you what to do. You have to figure it out yourself. So what I think is going to happen, if this power transition model is correct, is that I think we're going to have people do some very serious reflection and feel a very deep sense of shame. The ones who've been duped and allowed themselves to be hypnotized by the mainstream media, you have to take credit for that. And the people who have knowingly been ripping off everybody else. This is, you just have to sit and reflect about what you've been doing wrong and take credit for it. And that was what I wanted the international law section to do. I wanted them to admit how the lawyers have bamboozled everybody and how they've been collecting fees to simply allow this network of global corporate corruption to stay in place.
Where would you recommend people put their money today if they say, all right, listening to this broadcast, I feel a little queasy now about how I invest my money, where I put it. I could even be confused because I don't understand all of this, So, but what do I do? What would you say for the person on the street, if you will? Where would you put your money if they have $1 today to invest or to put away? Where would you put that $1?
Well, I'm not an investment advisor, but and also if you put the money into precious metals, there are so many precious metals. We're not going to be issuing all of them in the currency. What I expect is going to happen is that we're going to first very quickly and smoothly trade the Federal Reserve notes for the Treasury dollars that Ronald Reagan printed. Right. And that will give us the time to mint the aurum, which is gold pressed very thin. So the amount of gold in the currency is going to be equal to the face value of the bill.
Okay.
Yeah?
Wow.
So
that would be terrific.
We just do this exchange. And the rest of the countries of the world are going to be doing their exchange. Yeah. And so you don't have to have any abrupt changes. You just do it very slowly and smoothly. Right. And so I would hope that the capital markets would not plummet and dive, but what this network of global corporate control, what their agenda was first of all to panic us, to get us very angry at each other. They tried to nuke South Carolina in 2013. They tried to get us to nuke Russia just a couple of months ago. They have been wanting to create havoc. And fortunately, up until now, we have managed not to lose our heads. And I'm hoping that that's what we'll continue to do.
Yeah. Well, the talking heads are very disrespectful toward any sort of hard or real currency. And as they're saying that, we have countries like China, India, and Russia buying up the world's gold. In other words, these people have got to be awfully stupid, and we're awfully smart, and they don't realize it. Now, that's not the truth. When countries are buying literally hundreds of metric tons to thousands of metric tons per year, that they know something that we don't know or we don't want to accept. And so what I do is I just follow the money. I say, well, if they're doing this should be something that maybe I should be doing as well. I should be divesting myself of U.S. dollars and buying items of value, whatever they may be. Is that the right track for people, right mentality for people to take today?
I think it certainly is. But there are also the people who are expecting that we're going to have civil unrest, and they're telling you that you need to have a supply of food and all of that. There are risks because this is a very big transformation that we're going to be having.
Yeah.
But as I said, I'm optimistic that we will be able to do this in a way that's not going to have any of these dire consequences.
My concern, Karen, is that I'm a young guy. I'm only 72 years old. I got another 3 lifetimes to go the way I'm going. But and everyone here in the studio is laughing and they're saying, I hope that's not true. But we have developed intentionally an underclass. And the underclass is meant to be subservient to some sort of federal entity, the federal government, if you will. And any disruption of that, you have this large underclass supporting a very, very corrupt, by virtue of the fact that that's their existence, corrupt system. And aren't you going to have this monumental clash of mentality, of civilization within each country as a result, whether it be Europe or the United States?
I'm hoping that the first thing we do is, as I said, look to see how we ourselves have perpetuated the system by being bamboozled or by ripping everybody off. We've all been supporting this system in one way or another.
Right.
And so we have to figure out what do we want to do differently. And I would hope that when we do that internal soul searching, that we also recognize that we are each other's keepers.
Yeah.
And to realize that just as we've been holding the system up through our errors, that we'll cut a little slack for the next guy, and try helping to get a smooth transition. Because we don't want the French Revolution. That's
I know. I mean, this is where I almost see it going. Just by virtue of the fact you see what's happening in so many of the cities now with this police brutality, claims and whatever. Some of it's valid, some is invalid. But, oh, by the way, I was just notified we have 3 minutes to go before we go Zappo off the air. So I want to make sure I do not cut you short. I'd like to give you the next couple of 2 or 3 minutes so that you can summarize, close out, and then take some time to tell our listeners something about yourself and where they may contact you if you wish, or whatever. I want to give the next couple of minutes to you. To you, Karen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. And thank you very much for having me on. The time has flown.
It really has, right.
Well, this is, as you see, it's an ongoing process. So what you need to do is to stay in touch. And the best way to stay in touch is either follow me on Twitter, which is @Karen Hudes. You just run that along. And then you can also go to my website, which is www.kahudes.net. And I've got a contact page. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And we're all in this together. It is a coalition. And I'm pretty sure we're going to manage to keep things smoothly transitioning to a world which is going to be a lot kinder. It's going to be a lot better. We're going to have full employment, I think, and the United States is not going to be doing what it's been doing up until now, which is getting involved in conflicts. Right. The reason we were in Afghanistan, for those who don't know it, is because since we were sending all of our tax dollars to the bankers, we needed to have a way to pay for our street, for our education, for the expenditures that we thought our taxes were going to. So what did we do? We used their poppy fields to sell heroin, which was very...
I understand that there's many people who believe that the United States is the biggest drug dealer in the world.
Yeah, so we're not going to be doing that anymore.
I hope not. Right.
We're not going to be doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And we've got to find a way to do a good transition.
Yeah. It seems like this involves absolutely everyone. I mean, no one could be excluded in this process. We all need to coalesce somehow in one way, shape, or form, but it would require that our thinking absolutely changes. I mean, our mentality has got to change, and we've been so dumbified over the years. That's where my reluctance comes in and my skepticism comes in, because it seems that people stare at you like, all they do is watch, Dancing with the Stars or something like that. That's what's on their mind, and you go beyond that and they're totally lost. That's what scares me. Karen, we're about out of time. I want to thank you so much, and I do hope that you will accept our invitation to return at a later date.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for being our guest.
pleasure.
You've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today. Okay, folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. As my wife would say, remember, you are either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well, stay tuned.